Joining us this week on the Greater Society podcast, we have a group of young activists that have started a new podcast, and we're going to learn a lot about it. We have Sarah Zhang and Alexandra Coffey, and hopefully at some point during this interview, we will also have the third of the trio, Mallorie Marsan, I think I said that properly, joining us to discuss the Civic Circle Podcast, which is hosted on the Bucks County Beacon, who, of course, we've had plenty of people from the Beacon on the program before, and Sarah is a repeat guest. So today, we're going to discuss the podcast, the trajectory of it, youth engagement, and all that stuff under the sun. But first, I'll let Sarah, if you're a repeat guest, so I'll let you go first. Introduce yourself and tell people what you do.
Hey, my name is Sarah. I'm currently a third-year student at UNC Chapel Hill studying computer science and political science. I'm really passionate about youth engagement. I was previously on the show when I was a field organizer for Ashley E. Haas's congressional campaign. Obviously, she's running again, which is really exciting to see. And I grew up in Bucks County, started Youth for Unity back in 2020, and have kind of been involved with Bucks County politics since.
Awesome. Alexandra?
Sure. Hi, I'm Alexandra. I am a current CV senior, and I've always been really interested in politics, but I didn't get super involved until 2 years ago, when I transferred from Catholic school to public school for the first time. A lot of my work focuses on progressive education and youth engagement and just making sure that information, specifically like political information, is accessible to youth. And yeah, I'm really excited to be here too.
Before we dive into like the podcast itself, I'm curious, when you talk about access to political education and all that stuff and the information, where do you guys find your information? Like, what do you guys use as sources for like what you base your ideas on? I mean, I have a set of things that I look at, but I'm curious what you guys, you're a little bit younger than I am, so just to see the generational divide. I'm the last millennial. You guys are Gen Z. Where do you guys find your information? And like, what like outlets do you find is very credible?
In general, I am a really big fan of the New York Times Morning. I read it every morning, obviously, and I think that's probably one of like the easiest and best ways that young people can quickly get their news information. At the same time, I think it is really difficult for young people to find content that is specifically geared towards them, which is partially why we wanted to launch that podcast, and we'll get probably more into this later. But I feel like it's very hard to find content specifically on Bucks County that is targeted towards young people, which sucks because there is so much youth activism and interest in politics in this area. But generally, I know a lot of young people also get their information from TikTok, from Instagram. I used to run something in high school called the Gen Z Daily, where we broke down the daily news for high schoolers in the region. But I guess like the Civic Circle is kind of like a continuation of that, of tackling the news and making sure that young people are really getting access to this kind of information. But yeah, the New York Times, probably the Washington Post, and also supporting local journalism, obviously the Bucks County Beacon. I would say the Patch, I think, has shifted a little bit towards the right in recent years, but
Yeah.
I did used to read that, and also like the Philly Inquirer.
Yeah, I would say the same thing as Sarah. I view like the basic like big newspapers, the New York Times, the Post, also some local type stuff. I will say sometimes I do find like information on TikTok or Instagram. Like I'll hear about something and obviously I go and like search it up and research it before I believe it. But I definitely think that social media platforms have been useful in like spreading information to youth about political issues.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a good point to say that a lot of news outlets and political news outlets especially are not geared towards young people, the interests of young people. I mean, I think maybe there's some entwined like capitalistic interests that like kind of dovetail with that, because a lot of young people don't have the money to buy certain things or whatever, so they probably avoid targeting us younger folks. So let's go into like the podcast itself. Start off like telling me, you kind of hinted at it already, but tell us why you started it and like what's the goal of the Civic Circle podcast?
Yeah, for me, I would say the goal is really just to show that there are young people that are actively engaged in politics in Bucks County and to encourage other young people to get involved. The podcast was kind of an idea created by Cyril. We really can't take credit for it, but I know he has been so wonderful about making sure that young people are accurately represented in media and making sure that our voices are heard. He's done so many interviews with us about what's happening in school board and what was happening on the EHOG campaign when Ali and I were both working on it. And I think there's just like very much a large base of not only young people working in activism in Bucks County, but older people that do really want to support us. And I think another aim of the podcast is kind of to show those older generations that, like, hey, you really can trust those young people. We're here and we are trying to fight. This is what we're doing.
Yeah, I completely agree with Sarah. I think, our podcast is important to kind of show people that youth are still engaged in Bucks County and that we're trying to get things done. I also think, like we were talking about how some, or not some, a lot of teenagers find like political information on social media. I think that our podcast could be, like somewhat of a reputable source for them to, hear new information, making sure that it's reliable. And also it's not like a newspaper that they necessarily have to read through. They can just listen to something kind of easy.
Right. And Alexandra, let me stay with you. Since you are still in CB, how have you seen things shift over the last like 2 or 3 years in comparison? And I'm going to go to Sarah and see like what the differences are in the areas that she's been in. But for you, you've seen like the most, I mean, honestly, this school board race is the most vitriolic, I mean, in Central Bucks specifically, but the most vitriolic, hateful. They're spending, I mean, from what I can tell, at least over $200,000. Like, it is just burning money, wasting tax. Yeah. So I'll let you answer that question because I can probably just pontificate for hours and hours. But what is like, has there been a shift? Like, do you see it in school? Do you feel it in like when you're walking around town?
I will say, so I transferred 2 years ago from Catholic school, and I feel like kind of by that time, everything was already starting up. I mean, like maybe I could say like the first few months, there wasn't like huge talk about school board stuff. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's kind of always been hostile with school board stuff for as long as I've been here. I definitely think once everything started kind of going crazy, there was, I mean, maybe this sounds weird, but kind of like less political club engagement I've seen. I feel like it's kind of scary to talk about like the issues going on with the school board, like wanting to involve teachers and just that kind of thing. But yeah, I feel like Sarah might have some better insight because technically I'm still kind of new to the Central Bucks School District.
Yeah, I actually, just to throw my cards on the table on this too, I felt that I've seen a drop in some engagement in organized organizations, I guess, like in the specific organizations where it's like I see people out in the street more, I see people like angry more, but the engagement in organizations, and I know it's different because you're in school, it's different how those organizations interact with teachers directly and teachers having to like kind of risk things with the school board. But I'll tell you before I kick it over to you, Sarah, in 2019, there were like, it wasn't contentious at all. Like the school board, like we had an election in 2019 and we didn't even we didn't even have a candidate to run in 2019 in Doylestown, which is crazy. It's now Tabitha sits in that seat, but like at the time we didn't even have a Democrat to run. So like, that's how different it was just 4 years ago. But yeah, so Sarah, like, I guess you can take this question, like, how have you felt it's different, when you're home, but also like when you're at school, like, do you see a big difference in those two areas in political engagement?
Yeah. So I guess like for context, I have gone through the entire Central Bucks system, and my parents are both immigrants and they chose to settle in Bucks County because at that time, like Central Bucks was so well known and well regarded for how great of public schooling it provided. And that was basically the entire reason that they chose to settle in Bucks County. In elementary and early middle school, I will say there was definitely like, I feel like I experienced a lot of microaggressions and like indirect racism that kind of probably made me a little bit more aware than the average student. But political engagement, I don't think was something I was really aware of in Bucks County until the Parkland shooting in 2018. And that was when I first started getting involved with activism and I organized Holly Kong's middle school walkout. I would say there were like 200 or 300 people there. It was a really good turnout for doing a walkout in the middle of class. And that kind of showed to me that there were students who were willing to care about these issues often when someone else organized something. Like, I think there are a lot of students that will go to things when they see them happening, but aren't necessarily willing to kind of like create those things themselves, which is totally fine. And I kind of dropped off a little bit from local activism after that, but obviously with everything happening in 2020, I think like you were saying, there were just so many people like hitting the streets and protesting, and it was just great. Like, I felt like every time I was going to a rally, I would see my friends there and friends from other schools there, and there were just so many young people engaged at these events, and it was just so incredible to see. But also at the same time, that was kind of when me and some other people had finally started going to school board meetings in like our junior and senior years, and there were always like probably like 4 or 5 students there max. This was when Pari was fighting for Diwali to be like taken off, a day taken off on the Central Bucks calendar. And I think while there was like obviously a good amount of student support for that, there just weren't that many students like actually showing up to board meetings and being like, hey, like we want this, like we've experienced this. And every time, like it was kind of just me, my friend Bella, and like 3 of the same other people just showing up at school board meetings. So I think like youth activism in Bucks County is very mixed. It depends on what people are advocating for. And when it comes to school board and institutions, like you were saying, I don't think as many people pay attention to those kinds of things. And when I got to college, there was a really, really big shift in that. I think, especially because people are obviously of voting age now, there's just a lot more like activism to be done, I guess, and a lot of more like voter registration and bringing candidates on campus. And I would say UNC is a very politically engaged campus. I think that's been proven, especially with we had a shooting on campus a few weeks ago, which was national news. And there were a lot of students who were rallying after that and saying, like, obviously, we want gun safety regulations. But it's such a shift from like, it's so easy to organize things on campus here and have people genuinely care about them as opposed to like going home. I think there's like a lot of reasons for that. Firstly, young people in Bucks County were not as centralized. There is no campus, so it's really hard to get people to care about things. Second, if you don't have access to a car or a driver's license, it's really difficult to get transportation to some of these events.
Yep.
And thirdly, people just don't talk about things like the school board in school enough. Like, I don't know if that's your experience, Alexandra, but like when I was in school, I would be telling people like in my class, like, hey, this is what the school board decided this week. And they would all be like, what the heck? That's terrible. But they had never heard about it. So I think third, like more transparency with the school board would be really incredible and like encouraging young people to get involved.
Yeah. Transparency would be great considering that they just passed a gerrymandered map for a second time. But that's besides the point. Alexandra, do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, I agree with Sarah. We don't really talk about school board stuff too much. Like I'll mention to my friends like, hey, this is happening, but it's never like a big conversation. And like I said earlier, I do think it's because a lot of people are kind of scared to bring that stuff up in school, especially with like policy 321. Like they don't want to involve teachers in anything and like get them in trouble.
Yeah, it's really frustrating. I mean, especially because like some of my best friends are teachers, not necessarily in Central Bucks School District, but like you see them walk this line all the time. So like their political activism is limited at best. It's shut down at worst. So they kind of lose their functional First Amendment right just because they work a job, whereas other jobs wouldn't have to do that. So your first episode of the show was specifically focused on climate change, how climate change affects Bucks County, how it affects, your lives directly. You guys have brought up a bunch of different stories. Obviously, I think people should go listen to that and go check out the specific episode. But when you guys come out with new episodes, are you going to be focusing on like one issue every single time, or like what's the structure of your show moving forward?
Yeah, so I think each episode will be focused on like a specific topic, a topic that's kind of like relevant to the time that we're in. Like say if something big happens, obviously we're gonna probably focus on that for our next episode. So yeah, I think that's how it's gonna go for now.
And do you guys have a rough idea of your like release schedule so that people can make sure that I can make sure that people go and listen to it?
I would say we're trying to aim for once every month. Obviously that's not as frequent as most other shows, but like we are students. And we are trying to get our next episode out by like early October, I would say. So yeah, like at the beginning of each month is kind of our goal right now.
Awesome. So do you have an idea of what the next one will be?
Yeah, so it's been centered a lot around our discussion today. We're going to be talking about the school board elections, obviously, and I think like especially with young people, obviously most seniors are becoming eligible to vote for this election, and then we also have like so many graduated students who can request absentee ballots. So we really want to focus on making sure that people understand who the Neighbors United candidates are in the Central Bucks race and why it's so critical for them to request their absentee ballots or register to vote and like get involved with this election. We really just want to emphasize like how critical it is to make sure that we're getting these people on the board, because even though so many of us have left the district to go to college, or just don't pay attention to politics, I think there's a very much like lasting impact on people who still have like siblings in the district or friends and neighbors in the district. Like there's just so much of a community impact when we have poor people on the school board, and it's just really important for us to emphasize that for young people.
Definitely. So I mean, I've worked with a bunch of different young organizers, activists, and whatever since I became the chairman of the Democratic Party in 2020. So at least since then, I've used like different aspects of like plugging people into campaigns, doing whatever. I have noticed a level of critical thinking that exceeds, I could argue, even people my age, but also definitely some older folks. That's not to throw shade at the older folks, but like a lot of the people that I find engaged in activism and local organizing have this level of, okay, like I can read through all this stuff. I can kind of sift through what's BS and what's not. I understand the media diet better than somebody that's just on Twitter or Facebook all day. Even though we might all be addicted to our phones, we kind of understand it better. Do you guys feel that your and either one of you guys could take this, your education in Central Bucks has helped you like develop this critical thinking skill? Like, has it been inadvertent, like because of the stuff that you're dealing with, or is it like a direct thing? Like, oh, I've actually been taught critical thinking skills, and that's why I'm able to apply it to the world. That might be a weird question, but I find it interesting.
Yeah, I actually have a direct like experience with this. So after all the Black Lives Matter protests in like April, May of 2020, I remember emailing my AP Language and Arts teacher and being like, school feels so pointless right now. Like, I'm just so fed up with how the world is. And it feels like so silly for me to be learning what like a derivative is when there's just so many like greater problems out there. And I just I was just so like angry, and she emailed back and she was like, I completely understand how you feel, and I know like how isolating it is to like have to go to school right now and deal with all these issues. But she was also like, have hope, like you're here to learn critical thinking skills and you're going to apply them in the real world, and that's how you're going to really shift change. And I was like, wow. I feel like when you're learning how to critically think, you aren't actually thinking like, oh, I'm developing these skills, but like
Mhm.
looking back on it now, that class and certain others, like when I was really learning to like analyze things that I hated. For instance, I hate Shakespeare with a burning passion, but like being forced to read Shakespeare definitely made me like a better critical thinker.
Mhm.
Um, I really don't think you recognize those things then, and I think oftentimes still when I'm learning in college, I'm like, this feels a little bit pointless to me. But at the same time, I think it's just like making me a more well-rounded person. And also I think in the past few years I really realized how like everything is tied into like politics and activism and like DEI, and I think that that's like a realization I wouldn't have come to if I hadn't like learned how to critically think in high school.
Obviously, I don't have like experience with central bucks for most of my education, but I will
Mhm.
say I'm very like thankful for my Catholic education. I do think that it did. I know that sounds kind of crazy because
Mm-mm.
critical thinking skills might not be associated with Catholic school. But my teachers were all amazing, and they really did teach us to think outside the box, think critically, make sure that we were putting our effort into stuff, and yeah, I do think that has helped me. Also, my parents have never been like super politically engaged, but they've always been, they've talked about critical thinking skills, and they never like swayed me one way or the other. They've just like presented information to me, and helped me make my own conclusions about it. So I'm also thankful for that.
Definitely. And look, I went to Catholic school for 6 years myself when I lived up in North Jersey. It's different, but it's also, you can have great teachers. You can have people from all different walks of life. And that's like the beauty of understanding like a good teacher, a good professor, or any of these people that are like a good mentor to you. So wherever they come from. I mean, I know I saw him this weekend, and I don't know how much he would love me shouting him out, I guess, but Mr. Weaver from CB West, he was my social studies teacher. And like, I know so much about all of these different aspects of history that otherwise I wouldn't know because of his decisions in the curriculum, and like kind of highlighting different things and how he would bring it forth. So like having somebody that's teaching you that stuff is so vital. And I think it's interesting. And now it looks like we have our fourth member of the discussion. So Mallorie, you're joining. We're going straight through. So if you are here with us, we're recording. So you are joining us. And if you can hear me right now, you can feel free to jump in and introduce yourself if you would like.
Sure. Hi, I'm here. I'm so sorry. I'm so sick.
You're totally fine. You're totally fine. It actually now is like, it's like the wild card effect. You're coming in, shaking it up. So now introduce yourself, and then I'll ask you some questions, and we'll get caught up, and then we'll run it through.
Sure. Okay. So I am Mallorie Marsan. I'm a freshman at Temple University right now. Go Owls, of course, I'm majoring in English, political science. I'm minoring in public policy and data analytics. In regard to politics, I've sort of been involved since birth, basically, because both my parents are immigrants. So, naturally I've been involved politically because they're both from Haiti, actually. So the government there has always been an issue, always natural environment issues happening there. So naturally, again, I get involved, and I continue that on other issues as I grew up in Bucks County, issues like school board things, racism, immigration issues all around. So that's who I am.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us. We have talked a lot about different aspects of local organizing, activism, the podcast itself. I guess like what is like I'll start with you actually, Mallorie, on this, and then I'll let you guys loop around on it. What is like the driving issue for you that is like, if I could work on this one issue for, well, I guess hopefully not the rest of your life, because we would be able to fix it. But like, if I could work on this one issue and like make it my main my main thing. And like all the other issues in the world can be put aside. This is the one I want to focus on. What would that be for you?
I'd have to say immigration. I'm currently studying law. I want to be an immigration lawyer. So it's always
Awesome.
been the thing on my mind. Of course, both my parents, like I said, are immigrants. So the issue is the most prevailing one to me.
Awesome. I've said this, like, I feel like I said this at least in 3 of the last 4 episodes that I did of the show, where I'm just ranting and raving about like how the lack of actual immigration reform being on the table for what seems like decades is a real shame for our country, and we're just letting it happen, and there's barbed wires and rivers killing people, and just yeah. So Alexandra, what is like the driving issue for you?
I feel like that's kind of a hard question because I care about
Yeah.
a lot.
It's intentionally hard.
Yeah, maybe like most urgently, like environmental issues or working for the rights of women, specifically women of color. But yeah, it's definitely a hard question.
Yeah. Sarah?
For me, it's got to be educational equity, and I think that kind of started with Central Bucks, obviously, but then coming to UNC and being at the forefront of the affirmative action case, that was something that really drove me to care more about educational access and opportunity. And I think it's a really great issue to focus on because I feel like at the root of every problem is a lack of education. Everything kind of stems from not being educated enough or not being informed. So it's a root problem that we have to tackle.
Absolutely. Mallorie, this is kind of a loop back on a previous question that I asked the other two. So do you live on campus, by the way? I mean, like, I don't know for a fact, I guess, but yeah. Okay. So how has political activism, organizing, engagement felt different from Bucks County to Philadelphia? I mean, so I go to UPenn for grad school, so I know what it feels like, but I'm going to grad school for like government specifically. So of course, everybody I'm around is like super gung-ho about political organizing, but like for you, just like living in the city, like how has it felt different for you?
Well, I think it depends on the issue you're talking about. Like when it comes to when I was in high school, I felt I could speak to my school board members more closely than I really feel like I can speak to them at Temple. I feel like I saw them more frequently. I know when they're in meeting. And when I was able to talk to them, I was able to speak with them one-on-one if I could catch them. But when it comes to Temple, it's kind of always been an issue speaking to members. We keep getting new people on the board. People keep getting switched out. And there's been issues for years with Temple now with tuition and housing, and they still have not been solved. Although there were issues in Council Rock, I still felt more listened to, strangely. But when it comes to more, I guess, political issues, more personal issues, or I guess societal issues on this campus, I feel like there's some place for everybody to express what they're feeling, to go out into the city, not just express it on campus, but also off campus. Temple has amazing opportunities to go into the city and Center City. With the environmental clubs, they do things all the time. We just had our Temple Fest, which all the clubs are displayed, and I don't feel like, I feel like everybody had a chance to express what they wanted. And I feel like that's very different from what I experienced in Bucks County.
That's probably true. I would also say, I'll throw this out there. I think the state representative that represents Temple is Malcolm Kenyatta, who is a friend of the show, a friend of mine. And, if you ever want to get connected with him, happy to connect you because your voices should be heard. And he is somebody that actually would engage in and listen to, especially the young people, being that he's 33, 34. So like, which is, I know it's not young maybe for you guys, but it's still young for politics. And also in my cohort at Penn is Anthony Bellman, Representative Anthony Bellman, who is also a state rep in Philadelphia. So if you're looking for other ways to get involved in Philadelphia, just throwing it out there, they're great people. So Sarah, I know you worked on Ashley's campaign. Have you and Alexandra, you did as well?
We all did, actually. They were both my interns.
Awesome. All right. So this is actually a good question then for all of you. And I'll I guess we can start with Sarah. and because I've loosely talked to you about this before, but what was it like working on a campaign working on a campaign? Like, obviously it's different. Sometimes it's different when you're volunteering. Like, it's like, oh, like thanks for coming out to knock some doors. Like, here's some coffee and donuts, and then you never see him again. But like working on a campaign, what did it change your perspective on? And Ashley's great, but like you don't have to say anything about Ashley other than she's great. But the campaign itself, because campaigns suck. Like, they are not, like, they're fun, but they're not fun at the same time. It's like a weird, unique situation of, this is great, but it's also horrible. So like, what kind of experience did you have?
So I will say working on Ashley's campaign was not the first time I was a full-time field organizer. The first congressional race I worked on was right before, and it was for in UNC Chapel Hill. Like, we're in North Carolina's 4th district, and Durham County Commissioner Nida Alam, who is the loveliest and most incredible woman, she was running for Congress against a more like establishment candidate. And Nida's race was really incredible because she was like 28, I think, and everyone on that campaign, like all the staff, were young women, mostly women of color. We were all like probably between, at that time I was 19, between like 19 to like 30-ish. So it was just like a very like welcoming space because we were all like kind of very tight knit, had like similar identities. And then moving to Ashley's race, obviously Ashley is pretty young too, which is incredible. And I think like I was very, very privileged to be hired. I did not expect to be because I really had limited experience. But the campaign manager, she kind of took me under her wing and very much like taught me what it means to be a young woman in politics. My only qualm with the campaign was that I was the only staffer of color, and I think the campaign could have benefited a lot more if we had a Black voice on the campaign as well, because obviously Black people are very, I don't think there's like enough focus on like people of color in Bucks County in this district and like listening to their experiences.
Yeah.
And that's probably the only like major problem I had with them. But at the same time, it was really great because all the senior staff very much wanted me as a young person to focus on building youth political power. And that's how I got Alexandra and Mallorie on the team. And I think at one point we had like 50 interns, which was really incredible. Like, there were young people from all up and down the East Coast who wanted to get involved with our work. And I mean, obviously, I really was only able to put them on like the phone banks and the social media and stuff. But I hope it was still a good experience for y'all. And I mean, I think as a young person, it was like definitely hard work, like you were saying, but it was still such like an enlightening experience. All I'm saying is I'm never working on a campaign again, but it was a great experience for the time being.
Yeah, I have no plan on working on a campaign again either. I worked on a campaign in 2020, and but it is, I think it's like working, people say you work in retail or you work like waiting tables. Like, working on a campaign is like one of those experiences that it's like, oh, I understand now.
Yeah, it was more just so working from like 9 a.m. and like not having like a set end time. Like, there were times where I would be doing stuff until like 10 p.m. and I don't really think that's normal. So yeah, it's not the campaign's fault. It's just so much like pressure to always be on top of things. Like, there's just so much that you need to do.
Yeah, it's not the campaign, that's a campaign. That's like the unfortunate reality of it. But I guess for Alexandra or Mallorie, either one, how was the experience for you, and like what like lessons did you learn from working on a campaign?
You can go first, Mallory.
They're just staring
Thank
each other
you.
down.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Honestly, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I think Sarah was an amazing person to have like been the person I was working with in my first campaign. I'm a bit of a politics nerd, so I enjoyed what I was doing. But also the phone banking stuff, I'm not gonna lie, I'm not somebody who can speak to people the first try that easily. So that was something to get used to. But overall, it was a great experience. I'm happy I did it, and I would do it again, to be honest.
Awesome.
Yeah,
I'll keep
I
that
had
in
a lot.
mind.
Oh, sorry.
That's
I
okay.
didn't mean to say that.
It's totally fine. I just said I'll keep that in mind
Okay.
for future campaigns.
I had a fun time. It was nice because a lot of the interns were friends, just because a lot of my friends are involved in political stuff, and we all kind of told each other about the internship, and a lot of people joined, which is cool. I agree with Mallory. Phone banking was definitely really stressful for me because I'm not good at speaking to people on the phone normally, like people that I know well. But yeah, it was definitely a learning curve. I think the first or second time I did it, I texted Sarah and was like, "Hey, like this is going horribly. Like I'm so bad at this." And she gave me good advice. I forget exactly whose campaign she was mentioning. Maybe it was like one of Fetterman's campaigns. I'm not sure, but she was saying something about how like one vote or not one vote, but like a couple votes made a difference in some race, and how like
I remember telling you this. It was
yeah.
the example I always give to my people who are phone banking is that Bernie Sanders won his first campaign for mayor of Burlington by like
Yeah.
10 votes, I think. And it's like it clearly, and John Fetterman won his first race for mayor by a singular vote. And I think that like shows how much like a single conversation can change the trajectory of like someone's entire voting pattern. And like now they're both incredible senators, so pays off.
Absolutely. And just I'll emphasize this because people don't talk about this enough, and it's an entire chapter of my book. It's about Bernie Sanders and losing. Bernie Sanders lost 5 times before he became the mayor. Like 5 races for governor, Congress. He got blown out. And then it took the one time to win, and then the rest is history. So it's like learning to, get hit, get knocked down, get back up, run again, do it. Organizing is a long-term strategy, I suppose. I asked you this on the previous episode, probably, Sarah, that you were on. So I'll give you like a variation that you can answer too. But I always ask, and I think it's especially vital to ask young people, what is like a book, a person, a political figure, a historical figure that you look to for inspiration, like somebody that is like totally inspired you. And like I have different examples, like people like Bernie Sanders was, of course, the reason why I got engaged in political organizing in 2016 was my first election. That's when I was 18. I talk about, Fred Hampton being like an organizer and being like somebody that was assassinated at 21 years old because of how impactful he was. So like all these different people, or even, I talk about some of the founding fathers, there's all these different aspects of people that you can connect with. But for you guys, is there a like book, an author, a person, a historical figure that like kind of is your driving, like, oh, that's like what I look to, like when I'm struggling, like I'm gonna look to this quote, or I'm gonna look to that. And I'll give another example so I can filibuster so you guys can think, and then whoever wants to go first, you can unmute. But for me, like Franklin Delano Roosevelt is like another person like that like I love listening to his speeches. Like just if I'm feeling like crap, like if I'm a CPA, so like when I'm working 6 days a week in the winter, like I'm listening to FDR speeches to get me through. But yeah, is there anybody or any like book that kind of like brings forth that people should look at their speeches, read their books, whatever?
For me, I would say initially getting involved in politics was definitely the organizers of March for Our Lives. Like before that, I don't think we ever had like young people so prominently in the national spotlight advocating for what they believed in. And that was just so eye-opening to me as I was like 15 at the time, and I was like, damn, like young people can really make a difference. They can change laws, they can actually talk to politicians, and that was so just inspiring to me. And I actually got to meet David Hogg
Wow.
because he was here at UNC, obviously, after everything that happened.
Mm.
And I think that was kind of like my initial interest in politics, and now like working in North Carolina politics. Anderson Clayton, she's the youngest state party chair. She's the chair of the North Carolina Democratic Party, and she's only 25. And she is the brightest soul. Like, she grew up rural and has talked so much about the importance of rural organizing, and I think that's so eye-opening. She is an incredible person, and so passionate about uplifting student voices. And then just like a book recommendation, I recently read Recoding America by Jennifer Polka, and it was she launched Code for America and worked on like the White House's like technology policy and stuff like that. And I think it was very eye-opening to see like how much of the government is like needs to focus more on technology, especially for things like unemployment benefits and for Medicare, and like actually making sure that low income people have access to these technologies to get their benefits. So just a book recommendation.
Sweet.
I think I would have to say Nina Simone. Aside from her music, which I'm obsessed with, her actual politics itself has always been something I've aligned with. I grew up again in Bucks County, so the diversity there was very low. So I kind of struggled with my identity and being not only a Black girl, but a Black girl with kind of like a deeper voice, a stronger build. But Nina Simone was a woman who was not only famous, but one who was unapologetically Black, a strong Black woman. So she would wear her hair naturally. She had a strong bridge nose. She spoke about topics in her music. So I always found her to be sort of like a warm figure that I could look up to, not only musically, because I love music, but also politically. I identified with a lot of her personal opinions. I share most of them, and she's just always been a special person in my mind. And book recommendation, I'm also like an Angela Davis lover, so women in class will always be something I will throw at somebody if they ask me for a book recommendation. So I'm throwing that out there.
You already mentioned Tim Connor, but I definitely will say, like, when I first was getting into politics, probably like 2019, 2020, Fred Hampton was one of the first people I came across, and he's definitely a huge inspiration for me. More in like modern day politics, I'm definitely inspired by like AOC, Maxwell Frost, really amazing. And then also just like a quote, it's kind of random, but it was actually while I was writing my first school board speech, like to go and speak there for the first time, I came across this quote. I just pulled it up, but it's from Assata Shakur, and it's been like really inspirational for me. I've used it in like a lot of my speeches. I feel like it's kind of guided me, but the quote is, "No one is going to give you the education you need to overthrow them. Nobody's going to teach you your true history, teach you your true heroes if they know that that knowledge will help set you free." But yeah, that has definitely guided me in like my work with school board activism. And it's just a quote that I think is really powerful.
Awesome. Now I have a lot of book recommendations and people to check out. I have like so many books over on my bookshelf that I have to read because like people tell me, "Oh, you got to read this, you got to read that," and I'm like, okay. And I ask everybody the question, and then I like actually go get the books, and I'm like, oh, but I don't have enough time to do this. I guess this is like kind of my last-ish question. Maybe it dovetails into something else, but we obviously, and I'm lumping myself in with you guys. I'm only 27. So we, as young people in political organizing, face a different dynamic, I think, than has been seen since like the 60s, I want to say, with the political realignment of the parties. The Democratic Party and the Republican Party are seemingly trying to figure themselves out, I guess, right now. So I find myself, even as the chairman of the Democratic Party, wrestling with like, well, what are the concepts that we believe in? What are the perceptions that come off as a Democratic Party with being a progressive or like a social democrat within the party? How does that reflect? So I guess it's really two questions. One, do you feel that young people are welcome and represented in the Democratic Party? And well, I'll ask the follow-up question after, but anyone have like a strong opinion on that? I know I do, but
I think so. I worked on the Hill this past summer, and I think after that, I would say yes. Before that, I would have completely said no, but after like seeing who is running these offices on Capitol Hill,
That's
it
true.
is for sure young people. Like every Hill staffer I met was probably like everyone was under 30. Like I don't think I ever saw like an old person except for like the actual Congress people themselves. And also like all the young people there were just so friendly and energetic and like genuinely cared. I had the pleasure of meeting Maxwell Frost, and he was literally the nicest and most like humble person I've ever met. And I think like because so many staffers are young and like genuinely care about issues impacting the youth, like I even think that's like pretty accurately represented in President Biden's agenda. I think it's been a lot more youth friendly than people give him credit for. So I'd honestly say yes. I think that young people are pretty well represented at this point. Obviously, there's still a lot more work to do, but seeing all those staffers, I was like, man, like that's gonna be me in like 2 years.
Yeah, we got to move those staffers into the positions, though. That's the only difference. That's my opinion. Do you guys have anything else to add on that?
Yeah, I agree with what Sarah said. I definitely do think there's a lot of youth engagement in like these offices. I visited DC this summer. I was doing these different political programs. One was called Running Start and one was for the ACLU. And I actually got to visit Sarah and I met a few congresspeople, which was really cool. But I definitely agree. There are a lot of young people working behind the scenes to make everything happen. But like you said, I would love to see more young people actually in, the big positions.
And I definitely agree with Alexandra. I mean, I think behind the scenes, there are young people working all the time. But when it comes to the front end, I would love to see younger people actually being the faces of movements and being the faces of the party.
Yeah, that is my contention with things. It's I want to see the baton passed, let's say. So that's my project, but I'll reverse it now. The reason why I wrote my book was to answer the question, where are all the young people? Because I get asked that question all the time. I think, Sarah, you wrote an article about this. So like, where are all the young people? Let's change the question. But it's still from that point of view. What can elected officials, party officials, the party organizations themselves do to better engage young people, bring them in, and like put them into positions where they can succeed? So like what do you guys feel is like the necessary actions that can happen to get those steps in order?
I think we're already here. All the young people are here and ready to do the work. I think one of the biggest issues is, I guess, with older politicians not getting involved in the younger circles, maybe not coming and going to the events we have. I know occasionally some of the events that have happened in Bucks County, there'll be a few city members all come and visit, but not really, I guess, larger members coming to visit or getting engaged. But it's like, we know where you are, you know where we are. Just coming and going back and forth maybe and engaging with us would draw us in.
Yeah, I agree. I think the people who are saying where the young people just aren't looking, like honestly, like Mallorie said, we are here. We are trying to do the work. And if you're not gonna let us in, like that's on you. But I think there are very much like two different types of young people. There are the young people who are activists and at the forefront of advocacy movements, and then there are young people who are like the staffers. In my political theory class, we call them the deliberative Democrats, the people who are actually working in the institutions. So
Yeah.
I think there are two different types of young people that want to get involved in different ways. So it kind of depends, but I think both of those types of people are very important to listen to.
I like the term deliberative Democrats because that's a good way of putting it. Because I have friends that are the activist side for sure, and they won't touch the party with the 10-foot pole. And that's why I've tried to explain to some other people where it's like, yeah, like I'm in the party, but like other people like me don't want to be in the party. But it's like, it's a weird dynamic. Alexandra, I cut you off. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It actually worked well because there's a plane passing ahead. But yeah, I think Sarah Mallory basically covered it. I agree that young people are ready and like willing to work, but we just need elected officials to kind of sit down and listen to us. I think a lot of like even Democratic elected officials, even though they claim that they're like Democratic or progressive or whatever, don't really understand what young people want. And some of their opinions are definitely very conservative. So yeah, I think elected officials kind of have to sit down and listen to young people and listen to what they actually want versus what they think we want.
Can I just piggyback off of the answers that you guys all gave? What, like, I feel like I know if I was going to engage in getting young people involved in a campaign, X, Y, and Z, right? But like, where can, like, let's just say I'm a 75-year-old congressman, like, because let's be theoretical because we don't have that here in Bucks County. But like, I want to engage the youth. Like, what actually are some specific places to meet you guys? Like, not you guys specifically, but like younger people, like the 18 to 25. I'll age myself out of the group, like the 18 to 25-year-olds, where it's like, we need these people to turn out to vote. We want to engage them. I personally have a project of putting young people into positions of power. That's my thing. Like, I want leaders in those, young leaders in those roles. But like, we know theoretically they're energized, they're here, but like, where should they go and reach out to? Like, should it be Youth for Unity kind of organizations? Should it be like the CB West Young Democrats? Like, should it be like those types of things, or is it something else that it's kind of just being overlooked?
I think the easiest way to reach young people is on social media. Like, if you don't have a good comms chair, like, you are failing as a candidate. And every single politician should consider having a comms chair that is familiar with TikTok and Instagram, because that's how you're going to get us. Like, I don't know if y'all have seen Robert Garcia's TikToks, but he is the funniest and like just most relatable congressman I've seen on TikTok so far. And like, I mean, he's on the completely opposite side of the country. He represents a district in California, but like, because he makes like content about like working on the same committees as Marjorie Taylor Greene, or like not being able to like give like good speeches on the floor, like those are all things that like people on the outside, like even people who don't have a really good understanding of politics, can be like, oh my God, like that's so funny, like that's like relatable or something like that. So he clearly has a good comms team and they're killing it. So I would say that obviously reaching out to people at high schools, like I think I was reading something about how there's like a problem with like not doing enough like registration drives in like Central Bucks high schools and stuff like that. I do remember actually that Brian Fitzpatrick showed up to like a World Affairs club meeting at Central Bucks East like a few years ago. I don't know if that was just for like a photo op or something. I think it was, but
Probably.
like it was kind of random now that I think about it. So I mean obviously it's great if like elected officials want to come to those kinds of meetings, but like actually stay and engage with your students. Like town halls for young people at high schools would genuinely be like really beneficial, I think.
Yeah, they don't call them photo op fits for no reason. I really like that answer though. Although I was laughing because a lot of candidates in the last 2 years have floated even Doylestown Democrats folks that want to run the social media, want to have a TikTok account. I'm like, well, what are we going to be posting here? Like, what's the content? And I can just imagine some of the really cringe like videos going up every single week, and that worries me. I guess if it's good, it's good. If it's bad, it's really bad. So that's kind of the line to walk. But I think that's kind of covering a lot of what I had with you guys. Is there anything that you guys feel like you want to highlight one more time before? Well, obviously, I'll let you plug the podcast, but is there anything else that you feel like we missed? All right, cool. So, how about one of you guys can plug the podcast so I don't mess it up, but Civic Circle Podcast. Where can people listen to it?
We don't even have it set up on like Spotify yet. That's my honest answer. And we're currently just like hosting it on like Podbean or something. But if you go to the Bucks County Beacon Podbean, you can find us on there.
It's also on YouTube. Like, I guess so. I do know where it is, I guess, but it's on the Podbean thing, which I don't know what that is either, but soon enough, I'm sure you guys will have an RSS feed and it'll go on, Spotify, and it'll go on Apple Podcasts, all that stuff. So, because we're pre-recording this as well, so at that point, it might be figured out. So Civic Circle Podcast, you guys can Google it if you're, and I'll put a link in the description of this video. If you guys are listening, it'll also be in the description of the audio version of the show. You guys, on the Bucks County Beacon YouTube channel as well. It's on there with like a little cool like audio file thing, whatever. It's like up and down when people are talking. That's how I listen to it. But yeah, so do you guys have anything else you want to plug for yourself? Like social media, anything like that? All right, cool. All right. Thank you guys all for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Connor. Have a good one.
All right. Thank you guys.